Hey everyone, I'm Ruby Lawson, and if you've ever wondered what it's like to try and rewrite your story, even when your own family thinks it's impossible, well, you're in the right place. So I grew up in this tiny town called Prescott, Oregon. It was the kind of place where if you looked up at the walls of most living rooms, you'd see college diplomas hanging with more reverence than family photos. That was my world. Grades over kindness, respectable careers over dreams, and expectations so specific you could practically see their outline. My dad, Douglas, was this polished, always pressed political science lecturer at Oregon State University. To me, he always seemed like he was standing in front of an audience, even if he was just reading a cereal box at breakfast. My mom, Linda, ran the only high school in town as its principal. She genuinely thought every problem in life could be solved by sticking to tradition and applying just a little more discipline. The poster child in our house, my sister Natalie, she was the type who could recite the entire Declaration of Independence before she started kindergarten. By 18, she was off at Harvard Medical on a full ride, announced to the family with such enthusiasm, I'm shocked no one brought a marching band. Relatives came from across the state for her send-off. My dad basically gave a speech that night, glass held high and eyes shining, bragging that this is exactly the future of America. I still remember glancing around, realizing his next remark about how online business is just a childish distraction was squarely aimed at me. The truth, I didn't hate school, but I was curious about the world backstage, what powered the digital things we all took for granted. While other kids were copying down geometry proofs, I was soldering together wires or figuring out why a neighbor's printer wouldn't connect. At 12, I made my first profit, $10 and a couple of movie tickets for fixing that printer. By 15, I'd written enough code to launch my own little website for Miss Martin's flower shop. 3 days later, someone actually bought flowers online from her, and she just beamed at me like I'd handed her a magic wand. I thought my parents would be proud. Maybe even impressed. Nope. My mom just sighed and reminded me that SAT prep is more important right now. These little hobbies won't help you get into Columbia. My dad went further. One afternoon, he glanced over at the laptop I was fixing for a neighbor and flat out said, "If you want to spend your life as a tech support girl, keep it up, but don't expect a single dime from us." I forced a smile, the kind that looks like confidence if you don't look too close. But in my house? Being different wasn't just discouraged, it was almost forbidden. Dinner conversations always circled back to Natalie. "Did you hear? Professor Landon says she's a natural leader." Or, "Natalie was chosen to present at the Boston Symposium." Anytime they turned to me, it was just, "Ruby, are you retaking the math SAT again?" Then came my senior year, when every inch of our dining table was taken up by glossy college application brochures. Stanford, Princeton, Yale, you name it. My dad arranged them like he was curating a museum exhibit. My hands shook as I finally said, out loud, what I'd been bottling up for months. "I'm not applying to college. I want to start my own business. I even have a plan, a client, and believe it or not, almost $4,000 saved from web design." There was a metallic sound, someone's fork hitting their plate. My mom stared, wordless. My dad stood slowly, his voice harsh and sharp. "That's not happening, not under this roof." I'll never forget the way his eyes shifted, not worried for me, but actually kind of disgusted, as if I'd just announced I was running away to join the circus. But here's the thing about humiliation. After a while, it kind of hardens you. I didn't cry. I walked quietly to my room, packed 3 scuffed suitcases and my old laptop, and a week later, I was gone. Nobody waved me off. Nobody said good luck. I think they honestly believed I'd be crawling home in tears before the month was over. My first place was a drafty 3rd-floor walk-up in a grayer part of Portland. Not even 500 square feet, the kind of place where the kitchen was so small you could touch both walls at the same time. But it was my space. I put a scratched second-hand table beneath the only working power outlet and turned that living room into my command center. I brewed coffee with this faded old drip machine and worked sunrise to midnight every single day. No salary, no family expectations. Just me, a beat-up laptop, and an idea I quietly called rustic cart. Local artisans, potters, candle makers, basket weavers, filling Oregon with beautiful things, but most of them had no idea how to sell online. So I started making simple websites and took a tiny commission, 5% on each sale. Not revolutionary, but it mattered. But honestly, the early days were rough. I coded during the day and sent cold emails all night to little craft stores across the state. Almost nobody ever replied. When they did, it was, "So what college are you attending?" And if I answered, "I'm not in college," dead silence. One store owner even replied with a single laughing emoji and, "Good luck with that." Meanwhile, my bank account was draining way faster than I thought possible. Dinners were cup noodles or hard-boiled eggs, sometimes even canned beans. I'd crank up a cheap space heater trying to fight off the cold, but really, I was just trying to keep the self-doubt at bay. One chilly night, I actually called my mom. Just wanted to hear her voice. But when she realized I still hadn't gone back to school, she snapped, "Don't expect anyone to be waiting for you." So I didn't call again. 3 months in, Rustic Cart had exactly 2 clients. One was Josie, who made soaps by hand. The other was Walter, a woodcarver in his 70s who always called me Computer Girl and consistently forgot my real name. But he handed me $20 a month and let me handle his online orders, so honestly, I was grateful. Thanks to Josie and Walter, I just barely made my first electric bill without maxing a credit card. I kept hoping it would get easier, but it didn't. One icy February, after dropping off products at the post office for Josie, I got rear-ended at an intersection. No serious injuries, but my old Civic gave up for good. The repair bill? $800. I stared at the numbers in my tiny apartment that night, surrounded by boxes and bills, asking myself, did I seriously screw up my whole life on a wild, stubborn gamble? But sometimes, the lowest lows nudge you toward the right door. That night, desperate for anything, I decided to go to a local business meetup at the library, a free event I'd scrolled past 100 times before. I just wanted to be around other people who were struggling but still trying. That's where I met Marka Bennett, founder of an accounting software startup called Ledgerflow. Silver hair, steady stare, totally no nonsense. After her talk, I pushed myself to wait, then finally shuffled up and handed her my janky, self-printed business card. "Hi, I'm Ruby. I run a tiny little platform helping artisans get online. No fancy degrees and no funding, but I do have real clients." She paused, then smiled and asked, "Do you have customer data?" I nodded, heart thumping, and showed her my little spreadsheets of sales and growth, modest but real. She leafed through them, then dropped the single comment that would change my whole direction. "You don't need more individual sellers, you need B2B clients." I'll admit it, I didn't get it at first. But she explained, why struggle to sell 1 bar of soap at a time when I could build order management software and help dozens of craft stores at once? Same mission, just thinking bigger. We talked until closing. For the first time in months, I went home actually excited and ready to take a risk. So right after that game-changing conversation with Marka, I knew the whole rustic cart thing needed a reboot. Just the name alone sounded like a side project for an Etsy hobbyist, not a business ready to scale. With her mentorship, I made the leap, dumped the retail website idea, and pivoted to building real software, supply chain management tools for artisan businesses. I even renamed it Craft Logic Solutions. It honestly felt like crossing a bridge I didn't even realize was there. Those first few months after the pivot, barely 3 hours of sleep a night. I rewrote the entire platform myself, learning as I went, upgrading to a faster framework, adding new features, and emailing every craft store I could find up and down the West Coast. This was hustle at its rawest. Cold calls, late-night demos, pitching to store owners who'd never even used cloud software. Anytime I closed a tiny deal, it was a win. It paid off a bit of my car debt, kept the website hosted, and eventually let me bring on a part-time UX intern named Jared, a design student I met at a meetup who was more excited by sketching whiteboards on my fridge than by a paycheck. We literally worked on piles of instant noodle boxes. My living room stacked with notebooks, code printouts, ramen wrappers, and just 2 laptops. It was scrappy, but I'd never felt so alive. By the time fall rolled around, it was hard not to dwell on all the failures. Hundreds of ignored emails, dozens of ghosted calls. But then real opportunity arrived. One morning, I woke up to an email from Rebecca Tran, operations lead for Maple and Sage, a regional handcrafted furniture chain with 36 stores, still using some prehistoric inventory software from the early 2000s. Her email read, "Can your software track inventory per location? Send us a demo." Simple, direct, terrifying. Jared and I locked ourselves in for 5 days straight. No social life, just coffee and code, until we had a working demo. It was basic, but it let Rebecca see live dashboards, multi-location tracking, inventory alerts. When she called back, she skipped small talk. "We need this system in 60 days. Can you deliver?" I said yes with every ounce of fake-it-till-you-make-it energy in my body, but with one catch. "We'll need to work with your tech team on integration. Where are you based?" She replied, "Denver." I had never even set foot in a real corporate office. I told her we were a remote team. True, if you count my couch. But if needed, I'd fly out. Which is exactly what happened. My first visit to Maple and Sage's HQ, I wore a borrowed blazer, scuffed shoes, and tried to walk with the confidence of someone who hadn't written code at a noodle box desk 5 days prior. It worked. After that meeting, we signed a contract, $420,000 total, $150,000 up front. When I got the wire confirmation, I didn't celebrate. I just sat in the taxi outside their office, clutching my laptop bag, staring out at Denver's skyline, realizing I could pay off my debts, grow this thing, and maybe, just maybe, I wasn't a failure after all. Everything kicked into high gear from there. Maple and Sage referred us to 3 other chains. One of them, Craft, a huge craft material superstore out of California, came knocking and signed an even bigger deal, $630,000 for a system-wide deployment. That's when it finally hit me. I had to make things official. Filed the paperwork, incorporated in Oregon, rented our very first actual office, not just my apartment, and hired 5 full-time employees. For the next 2 years, Craft Logic took off like wildfire. We opened offices in Portland, Denver, and San Diego, eventually serving over 60 retail chains. The platform, once little more than a solo coder's side project, evolved into a real ecosystem. Order management, inventory tracking, customer analytics, shipping integrations, the works. In year 3, we crossed $1.2 million in revenue, netting our first $300,000 profit. By year 4, I was speaking at tech conferences, showing the world how simple software could transform old-school industries. After one talk, a sharply dressed man handed me his card. Michael Davis, Chief Strategy Officer at a major investment group. "We've been following Craft Logic. If you're interested in acquisition talks, we have a proposal." It was surreal. That week, I got 3 more acquisition offers, one valuing the business at $36 million. I'll be honest, it was tempting. My team was buzzing with excitement or anxiety. Jared, my first intern, pulled me aside and blurted out, "If you sell, I'll be happy for you, but please don't. We're not finished." He was right. This company wasn't just a job or an exit strategy. It was proof, for myself and for people like me, that you can build something completely different from what everyone expects. I turned down every offer, not for pride, not for my family, but because selling Craft Logic at that moment would have meant admitting their version of success was right, and mine was an accident. Even as things grew, I kept my life incredibly low-key. Still drove my ancient Subaru, rented a modest 2-bedroom in Beaverton, told nosy relatives I built software tools for small businesses, and let them believe what they wanted. Meanwhile, my parents only called when Natalie did something worth bragging about. New residency in Seattle, another medical journal article from her husband. I learned to respond with a smile and then return to my real life. Then, everything in my family shifted. My dad's department at the university was shut down. Budget cuts after nearly 3 decades. Just as the shock hit him, my mom was diagnosed with an autoimmune thyroid disorder with steep medication costs not covered by insurance. I discovered their mortgage had fallen behind and medical bills were piling up. Natalie, always busy at the hospital, replied with a generic, "I can't help." Nobody reached out for my help, not that they thought I could anyway. But I knew if I didn't step in, they'd lose their home. So I got creative. I asked my lawyer to create a trust fund. Under a name nobody would connect to me. Each month, I sent in enough to cover their mortgage and hospital bills. To make things look legitimate, I paid my father via a shell company for consulting services. Not a word of it traced back to me. And for Natalie, when I heard she couldn't afford daycare for her newborn twins after an expensive C-section, I arranged for 2 special scholarships, both in her kids' names. She posted on Facebook, "Miracle. God provides in mysterious ways." I gave a dry smile and just kept wiring the support. For 3 years, I spent more than $120,000 quietly propping up my parents, my sister, her kids, all legal, all invisible. Never once did I get a thank you. Never once did they suspect. And that was fine. At work, I was the CEO building a multi-million-dollar company. To them, I was still the dropout who sold things online. But that double life had to end eventually. That year, Thanksgiving felt different. Rain pelted the Salem suburbs as I walked into my parents' house carrying a bottle of wine, a folder stuffed with color-printed pages, and a USB drive containing my recent tech conference presentation. I'd waited long enough. Mom was bustling, plating onto ceramic dishes with that same meticulous energy she had every year, while Dad sat in his worn armchair, newspaper folded across his lap, giving me a nod instead of a hello. Natalie came down the stairs looking immaculate, like she could be on the cover of a medical magazine, carrying the air of perfect achievement. Her husband Matt was unbuckling the twins from their booster seats, joking softly about the kids messing with my weird laptop, a jab I met with a faint, controlled smile. Dinner started at 6 sharp, as always. Mom raised a toast to health and family unity, and Dad launched into his usual spiel, praising Natalie's medical accomplishments and Matt's dedication as an ideal son-in-law. Not a word about me. As forks clinked against the plates and voices filled the room, I gently placed my folder on the table. Silence fell. I cleared my throat and said simply, "I want to share something with you." Mom's frown deepened as if I'd spilled gravy on the good tablecloth. Natalie shot me a suspicious glance, lips tight. I opened the folder to reveal a copy of Tech Bridge Weekly, featuring a rare photo of me on the cover. Headline, "Ruby Lawson, founder and CEO of CraftLogic Solutions, the software platform reshaping America's artisan market." Dad flipped through the magazine, biting back disbelief. "Where did you get this?" he asked, cold as the rain outside. "From my own life," I said. "I've been running CraftLogic for 8 years. We employ more than 180 people in 3 cities. The company is valued at $47 million, and, Mom, Dad, I'm the one behind every financial support you've received these past few years." I laid out the proof. Bank transfers from the trust fund covering mortgage payments, health insurance paperwork paid through a private source, my shell company's consulting contract for Dad's curriculum work, and scholarship letters for Natalie's twins. The room froze. Dad stood abruptly, face flushed. "You're making this up. A college dropout, suddenly a software millionaire. Don't insult our intelligence." I stayed calm, steady. "I thought you needed to keep your pride, but I'm tired. Tired of hiding everything just to be tolerated." Mom whispered, fearful, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because every time I tried, you looked at me like an outsider," I answered. "I chose to help without asking for recognition." Natalie leaned forward, sharp. "I've worked 14-hour days to become a doctor, and you? You write code at home and now act like a celebrated CEO. It's laughable." "I'm not denying your hard work," I said, "but I've fallen asleep at my keyboard, lived on ramen, and built this from nothing. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough! You're a fraud and a disgrace to this family. Someone like you only makes money through deceit. I stood up calmly. So that's it. You don't want to know the real me. You just want the ideal version you created. Fine. Gathering my papers, I walked toward the door. Mom grabbed my wrist softly. Ruby, what about next month's support? Looking at her, my voice barely a whisper, I said, Mom, people who see me as a disgrace can't keep living off my money. This ends now. I stepped out into the cold rain, the weight of years lifting with each drop. The next morning, without goodbyes or messages, I caught a 6:15 a.m. flight to Florida. I sat by the window watching Oregon's clouds dissolve beneath me. This was no longer the place I belonged. 3 years earlier, I had bought a vacation house on Clearwater's outskirts, a modest 3-bedroom with a red tile roof, white paint, grapefruit trees in the yard, and lavender along the fence. I used it as a quiet escape, but now I came to rebuild my life. The first week was detox, ripping out cheap prints, fake antiques, and lifeless decor. I hired Elena, a local interior architect, to transform the space. Clean, bright, modern, a place to breathe and just be. At the same time, I cut all financial ties to my family, terminating the trust fund, ending the consulting contract, and stopping the scholarships. No explanations, no drama. I didn't owe them anymore. 2 weeks later, I walked into CraftLogic's new headquarters in Clearwater's West Bay business complex. 9th floor, glass walls flooding the space with sunlight, dark walnut floors, that salty ocean breeze through open windows. I finally felt at home. Jared, Rachel, and Dominic, the original Portland crew who'd uprooted to start this new chapter, were waiting. We're resetting everything, Rachel asked during our first meeting. Exactly, I said. No more hiding, no more double lives. This is freedom, for the company and for me. CraftLogic thrived after the move. We secured 3 new Florida clients in just 1 quarter. An investment fund from Boston offered a valuation of $59.7 million, not including the AI products we were developing. I stopped hiding who I was. No more cheap jeans to seem humble, no more covering expensive gadgets. I was the CEO, the founder, and unapologetically Ruby Lawson. Within weeks of settling, I became active in Florida's business community. At a Women in Tech event, I met Caleb Meyer, a digital transformation consultant, with an easy smile and a handshake that felt familiar. We sang favorite teenage songs, barefoot on the beach under stars, sharing earbuds and stories. I didn't need to dodge questions or hide the company's success anymore. You're the only person I know who built a company and kept it secret, Caleb said quietly one evening. I laughed. I used to think if people knew, they'd try to rewrite me into someone else. Now, if they can't accept the real me, they don't get to be in my life. Our mint pineapple cocktails clinked softly, an unspoken promise to live freely and honestly, no strings attached. That last dinner at my parents' house, that cold, biting night, became my measure. Every dismissive glance and sharp word had fueled me instead of broken me. Each day I live honestly is one I've already won. I started thinking a lot about young people like me, without degrees but with ideas burning inside them. Not everyone can grind alone in the dark basement of obscurity or meet a lucky mentor at the right moment. So I launched the Ruby Foundation and the Forge Forward Grant, a no-questions-asked fund and mentorship for young founders with promising ideas. We don't care where they went to school, only what they want to build and why. The announcement was in a small auditorium drenched in Florida sunlight and the rich aroma of coffee. I went up without scripts or slides. Here are people who can craft the perfect wooden chair at 16, others who create algorithms without a single computer science class. If we deny them because of their diploma, then it's we who are missing out. Within 6 weeks, we received nearly 500 applications. Alicia Monroe from El Paso was the first recipient, a 22-year-old building scheduling software for local clinics. She cried when we video called. I didn't think anyone would pick me, she said softly. My education section says only high school. I smiled and said, maybe you just hadn't met the right reviewer before. Forge Forward isn't just a fund. It's a response to that scared 19-year-old me, curled up in 450 square feet with hopes too big for the space. One warm June afternoon, watering lavender in my Clearwater yard, my phone rang. It was Natalie. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I want to thank you," she said, voice soft, almost shaky. It was the first time she'd spoken without barbs. I poured a glass of water, voice smaller than possible. "Thanks for calling." That call didn't open every door, but it began closing old wounds, slowly on my terms. A few weeks after that call, a handwritten letter arrived. Dad's handwriting, slanting left exactly like the essays he used to grade. The letter was raw and honest. "Ro, I don't know where to begin," it read, but I was wrong. I believed there was only one path to success. I let my pride blind me to your truth. When you spoke at dinner that night, I fell apart, not because you did anything wrong, but because I realized I was no longer the man you needed me to be. If you don't forgive me, I understand. But know this, I'm proud of you. I read that letter over and over, no tears, just a tightness in my throat I couldn't name. Maybe relief, maybe sadness. I didn't call back right away. I wasn't ready. But a few days later, I sent a postcard from Sarasota. "Thank you for writing. I'm building the life I've always dreamed of. If you want to be part of it, the only condition is respect." That was the moment I set my boundaries firmly. I didn't go back to the fantasy of a perfect family I once wished for. Instead, I gave them a second chance, on my terms. A few months later, at an informal women's startup meetup in Tampa, I shared my story. Not dramatized or sugar-coated, just real. "Sometimes," I said, "the best thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to be loved by people who refuse to understand you." The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted into applause. I realized I wasn't just healing, I was sparking something. One early summer afternoon, sitting on my porch reading the paper, I almost ignored the call from a Salem landline, but something told me to answer. It was Mom, voice softer than ever. "Your father and I are coming to Florida next month. We were wondering if we could see you." Her words felt light as the breeze, yet heavy on my chest. "How do you want to see me?" I asked, calm but steady. "As the daughter you once cast out? The CEO no one can ignore? Or just as me?" Her answer was quiet. "Just as your daughter, if you'll allow it." I needed time, not to forgive, but to ask myself if there was anything left inside me to even want from that meeting. 3 weeks later, I chose a small coffee shop by the shore where palm trees whispered in the ocean breeze. I arrived early, ordered a cold brew, and waited. Exactly at 9, they arrived. Dad's hair nearly white, moving slower. Mom with softer eyes than before, wearing a beige floral dress. We sat in silence that stretched for nearly a minute. Dad was the first to speak. "I read your interview in Founders Weekly. What you've built, it's impressive." I nodded, no smile, just steady thanks. Mom reached out, hand trembling slightly, resting it gently on the table. "It took us a long time to understand you never needed to be anyone's copy." I looked her in the eye. "Don't say that if you don't mean it. I'm not here for polished speeches." In that rare moment, I saw her. The woman who had always thrived on rules and control, finally powerless. Dad was quiet, then said, "You asked me once if I didn't see you as the pride of this family. What I saw, today I want to admit I was wrong." I didn't expect those words, but I didn't need them to define me. Mom, Dad, I no longer live for approval. I didn't build this life to earn praise or redemption. I've spent the last 2 years living more honestly, more fully. Nothing about that makes me want to return to an older version of myself. Mom nodded, no anger, no protest, just acceptance. We talked another 20 minutes about the weather, the new park by the beach, and even Natalie's kids, though I wasn't ready to see them yet. As we left, Mom hugged me softly. Not too tight, no tears, just real. For the first time, I felt she embraced me without trying to reshape me. They flew back to Salem that evening. I didn't wave. I didn't look back. I walked along the shore, texting Caleb. I did it. His reply came immediately. Then do what? I smiled, sitting among string lights and friends. Every Sunday, I host a small dinner in my backyard, Homemade bread, shared wine, laughter. Jared, Caleb, and young founders from the Forge Forward Fund fill the seats. We don't talk valuations or payroll. We talk about purpose, choices, and living honestly. I don't need a family to take me back. I have a community that chose me from the start. No conditions, no apologies. I understand now. No one needs to be born into a perfect family to live a full life. All we need is the courage to create it ourselves. I didn't forgive them because they changed. I forgave so I could be free. Now I'm not moving forward to prove anything. I'm moving forward because I'm already whole. Ruby's story isn't just about starting a successful company. It's a powerful reminder that self-worth isn't tied to family approval or fancy degrees. In the real world, many people quietly build their own paths, bravely stepping outside the molds forced on them to live genuinely. Healing doesn't come from being forgiven. It comes from choosing not to keep enduring pain. Success isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about living freely, honestly, and without fear. So what about you? Would you dare to live your truth, even if it meant losing approval from those closest to you? That's the end of Ruby's story. Let me know if you want me to help you craft a closing call to action or anything else.